London, the summer of 1912. The city is alive with the grind of industry and the clatter of hooves on cobblestone. Horse-drawn carts weave through the smoke and smog of Maida Vale, a respectable corner of West London. The air smells of coal and soot, mixed with the sharp tang of ink from the nearby print shops. A motorcar backfires down the street, still a novelty, still something people turn to stare at. Inside a red-bricked townhouse, a woman lies in bed, exhausted but calm. Her husband sits nearby, home on leave from his post in India. The room is quiet. Then a newborn's cry splits the stillness. Alan Turing has arrived. From the outside, it's a modest beginning. His father, Julius, serves in the Indian civil service. His mother, Ethel, is strict, religious and precise. A woman who believes in rules, order and tradition. Soon, duty calls again. Julius and Ethel return to India, leaving baby Alan and his older brother in England, to be raised by a foster couple in the leafy suburbs. It's a common arrangement for colonial families, but for Alan, it's the beginning of a life spent at a distance, distant from his parents, from the other boys at school, and often from the world around him. Even as a toddler, he's different. He's not interested in dolls or soldiers. He stares at patterns in the wallpaper for hours. He watches ants with intense focus, whispering theories about where they're going. He learns to read almost overnight. He asks questions no one knows how to answer. Why is the sky blue? How can numbers go on forever? Why does nobody else care? The adults around him don't know what to make of it. Some think he's brilliant, others think he's odd. The word eccentric gets whispered, and as Alan grows, the space between him and the rest of the world widens. Then boarding school. Sherborne in Dorset, an old institution, strict, traditional, and not designed for boys like Alan. Latin and scripture take precedence over science. Rugby and rowing matter more than mathematics. Alan doesn't fit. He's clumsy, socially awkward, always a step behind in conversation, but a mile ahead in thought. He's teased, ignored, misunderstood. But in maths and science, he's untouchable. Alan escapes into equations, into the ordered logic of numbers and atoms. They never lie, they never mock, they never leave. And then someone enters his life who doesn't treat him like a misfit. Christopher Morecambe, a fellow student, brilliant, confident, charming, but kind. He talks with Alan, not at him, encourages him, challenges him. They bond over maths, physics, the mysteries of the universe. For the first time in Alan's life, he feels something more than interest. He feels seen, understood, maybe even loved. He never says the word, not out loud, not in 1930s England, but it's there, in the glances, in the way he lights up when Christopher walks into the room. It's young, fragile, and unspoken. And then, heartbreak. Christopher falls ill, tuberculosis, complications from unpasteurized milk. One day he's there, brilliant as ever. The next, he's gone. Just like that. Alan is shattered, but grief doesn't stop his mind. If anything, it sharpens it. He dives deeper into science, into the laws that govern life and death, logic and fate. He begins to wonder, could thinking itself be reduced to something mechanical, something predictable, something universal? He wants to honour Christopher, to finish what they started, to understand everything, life, intelligence, and maybe one day how to build a machine that can think. And in that moment, in that quiet storm of teenage grief and genius, the foundations are laid, not just for a new kind of mathematics, but for a future that hasn't even been imagined yet. Cambridge, 1931. A city of cloisters and spires, honey-coloured stone and ancient clocks that tick with centuries of expectation. Here, among the manicured lawns and Latin mottos, the brightest minds in Britain sharpen themselves against the whetstone of tradition. Alan Turing, walks awkwardly through the grand courtyards of King's College, his gown trailing slightly, his tie askew. He is 20, but often mistaken for younger. His gait is stiff, his voice clipped, and he still doesn't quite understand the rhythms of polite conversation. And yet something extraordinary is happening. At King's, Turing is surrounded, at last, by people who don't just tolerate his brilliance. They celebrate it, they nurture it. His tutors recognise him not merely as gifted, but as something altogether rarer, a true original. He immerses himself in mathematics, not the dry arithmetic of ledgers and shopkeepers, but the thrilling frontier of abstract thought, logic, number theory, probability. In these shimmering fields, he is free to think without walls. And it is here, surrounded by ancient books and modern ideas, that Alan begins to ask a question that very few people on Earth are yet asking. What is a mind? At the heart of it lies an even deeper mystery. Can a machine be said to think? Can thought be broken down like a chemical reaction into a series of discrete, logical steps? Turing begins to imagine a device, an imaginary machine, not made of wires or gears, but of pure logic. A machine that reads a line of symbols on a tape, following a set of rules. Move left, write this, move right, check the symbol, decide, repeat. It's a simple idea, and it changes everything. The year is 1936. He publishes a paper titled On Computable Numbers, with an application to the Entscheidungsproblem. Not the catchiest title, perhaps, but its contents quietly ignite a revolution. Within its pages, Alan Turing describes the concept of what we now call the Turing machine, a theoretical model of computation that defines the very limits of what can be known, what can be calculated, what a machine might one day do. This paper, scribbled in the margins of history, becomes the foundation of computer science. Years before the word computer means anything more than a person who calculates sums. But even as he stands on the edge of genius, Alan remains oddly unmoored from the world around him. He's passionate about the ideas, not the accolades. Social graces still elude him. He forgets to eat, misplaces his bicycle, mumbles to himself during walks. And there's another truth, pressing in from the edges, something unspeakable, something dangerous. He is a man who loves other men. And in 1930s Britain, that simple fact is a crime. He tells almost no one. But the tension of it hums beneath everything. In the midst of all this, he leaves for America, Princeton University. It's an elite institution, full of brilliant minds and big egos. Turing arrives with a suitcase, a bicycle, and his usual scatter of eccentricities. There, he studies under Alonzo Church, one of the few men who can match his intellect, if not his imagination. At Princeton, he earns his PhD in record time. He could stay. The Americans offer him funding, resources, a future. But war is coming. Europe teeters. Germany rattles its sabres. The hum of radio static grows louder. Turing packs his bags and returns to Britain. He doesn't say much, he rarely does, but he knows something few others yet understand. If machines can solve problems faster than any human alive, then they might be our best hope for what's coming next. 1939. War is declared. The wireless crackles. Chamberlain's voice, weary and grave, announces Britain's entry into conflict with Nazi Germany. As the country braces for blackout and rationing, a different kind of battle begins. One fought not with bullets but with logic, with mathematics, with silence. Alan Turing boards a train north of London, his destination marked only by a government letter stamped confidential. He arrives at a sleepy railway platform in Buckinghamshire. No soldiers, no fanfare, just a bicycle, a hedgerow, and a gatekeeper who knows better than to ask too many questions. This is Bletchley Park, an unassuming country estate wrapped in secrecy. Its corridors are soon filled with chess champions, classicists, crossword experts, and cryptanalysts, Brilliant misfits from Oxbridge and beyond, but none quite like Turing. Alan is assigned to Hut 8, a drafty, hastily built wooden structure on the edge of the estate. His task is clear, if impossible: break the German Enigma cipher. The Enigma machine is a portable cipher device used by the German military. It looks like a typewriter crossed with a cash register, but inside, it's a nightmare of rotating rotors, plug board settings, and electrical circuits. Every time a key is pressed, the internal wiring shifts, meaning the same letter will produce a different cipher each time. There are possible settings, 150 quintillion possible settings, and that is 150 and 18 zeros. And the Germans change those settings every 24 hours. Breaking Enigma isn't about solving a single puzzle. It's about solving a different one every day, faster than the Nazis can win the war. Turing stares at the problem and does what no one else dares. He imagines a machine that can think faster than any human. Not just a calculator, but a logic-driven device that can sift through all possible Enigma settings until it finds the one that makes sense of a known phrase in the encrypted message, what they call a crib. He sketches diagrams, scribbles algorithms, argues with military brass who scoff at the cost. He's impatient, intense, socially awkward, but relentless. Eventually, with help from engineer Harold Doc Keane and Polish cryptographers who had already made breakthroughs, Turing's design begins to take form. Picture a 6-foot-tall cabinet filled with rotating drums, spinning endlessly, wired into hundreds of circuits and relays. It doesn't look like much, but when switched on, it hums and clicks like a symphony of logic, each tick bringing it closer to uncovering the enemy's secrets. The bomb works by simulating Enigma's rotors at lightning speed. It compares thousands of possible combinations against a crib piece of plain German text likely to appear in the message. Phrases like Heil Hitler or weather report, predictable but vital. If the bomber hits a contradiction, zap, that path is dead. But if it doesn't, a light flashes, a message is possible. And now the code breakers can decode everything sent on that setting for the next few hours. But time is the enemy. The Germans reset Enigma at midnight, so the bombs must work through the night, every night. By 1943, over 2 bombs are in operation. Men build them. Women, mostly Women's Royal Naval Service, operate them in shifts, 24 hours a day. They're not told exactly what they're doing, just that it matters. And it does. The intelligence decrypted by Turing's machine becomes known as Ultra, so secret, even Churchill is told only on a need-to-know basis. It reveals U-boat positions in the Atlantic, tracks troop movements. It even helps determine the timing of the D-Day landings. Winston Churchill later calls the Bletchley Park team the geese that laid the golden eggs and never cackled. And Turing? He becomes their quiet leader, not by charisma, but by sheer, inescapable brilliance. Still odd, still unknowable, but utterly essential. Yet outside the wire fences and secrecy oaths, no one knows his name. And that's where the Germans slip up. Because no matter how clever the machine is, it needs a crack in the door, a pattern, a human weakness. And the Germans, in all their supposed precision, leave one. Every morning at roughly the same time, Luftwaffe weather stations broadcast the day's forecast, always in the same format, always beginning with Wetter Vorhersage, weather forecast, and at the end of so many messages, Heil Hitler, 2 words that, without knowing it, help save millions of lives. The team at Bletchley uses these expected words as cribs, phrases they can plug into the bomb to narrow the field. It's still hard, still painstaking, but it works. Until Crete, May 1941. The Battle of Crete is raging. German paratroopers are dropping from the sky, and the Allies are struggling to hold the line. The British High Command is receiving ultra intercepts, messages decrypted from Enigma, thanks to Bletchley's breakthroughs, but something isn't right. The Germans seem to know the Allies are reading their traffic. It's subtle at first, slight changes in their routes, in their timing. Then it gets worse. The enemy starts feeding false information, turning ultra into a trap. Why? Because someone in London, perhaps a general or aide, has acted on intelligence in a way that reveals the source. A German message is intercepted. The words are chilling. There appears to be a traitor in our midst. Turing and the others are furious. One slip, one careless move, all that work jeopardized. The Germans begin rotating their rotor wheels more frequently. New plugboard settings, more discipline among operators. No more repeated keys like PPP. Turing knows what this means. The door is slamming shut. Back at Bletchley, the pressure becomes unbearable. They need more cribs, more bombs, more staff. The team grows. Thousands of women are recruited, many from the Women's Royal Naval Service, working in shifts around the clock. They aren't told what they're doing. They don't need to be. They just know the work is important, and it is. Because even after the Crete scare, cracks still appear. Human error doesn't vanish, it's constant. Operators still reuse phrases, still fall into habits. One German naval officer writes messages to his mistress using pet names. Another likes to open with, "Nothing to report." That phrase becomes gold to the code breakers. And Turing's machine evolves. By late 1943, there are over 200 in operation. Messages that once took weeks to solve are now cracked in hours. And with that speed, something incredible happens. The Allies begin to see the war unfolding in real time. They track U-boats in the Atlantic, redirect convoys away from ambush, watch as Hitler shifts troops to Norway believing D-Day will land there, all because of fake messages planted through controlled leaks, all because of Turing's machine. The irony, no one is allowed to know. Winston Churchill once called Bletchley Park's work the thing that won the war. He said, "Leave nothing to chance, give them everything they ask for." But even he kept it secret. For decades, Alan Turing's name is absent from the war's official histories. No medals, no public honour, just whispers, rumours, then silence. And in that silence, a man who changed the course of history returns to his desk. He is 30, tired, brilliant, unrecognised. The machines are still running, but the war is shifting. And in Turing's mind, a new idea begins to form. If a machine can mimic thought to break a code, what else might it one day understand? In the spring of 1941, the Allies had something the Germans believed impossible. A working German naval Enigma machine, complete with code books. It had come not from a laboratory breakthrough, but from the deck of a U-boat. In May 1941, Royal Navy destroyers cornered U-110 in the North Atlantic. Her captain, believing she was sinking, ordered the crew to abandon ship. The boarding party from HMS Bulldog went in fast, searching for charts, logs, and in the wireless room they found it. A fully intact Enigma machine and the vital short signal code books. It was the kind of find intelligence officers dream about, the key to the enemy's most secret communications, still warm from their hands. The machine and documents were whisked to Bletchley Park under such secrecy that most of the crew who captured it were told never to speak of it, not even to other sailors. The Germans, crucially, had no idea it was gone. They assumed U-110 had sunk with all secrets aboard, and almost immediately, Ultra, the code name for this decrypted intelligence, began pouring in. It was in this flow of messages that the truth about Crete emerged. The intercepts were chilling in their detail. Dates, units, even the number of planes to be used in the airborne invasion. The Luftwaffe was planning the largest airborne assault in history, a swarming drop of paratroopers to seize the island from its exhausted Allied defenders. The British High Command read these messages. They knew exactly when and where the invasion would come. But here's the impossible bind. If they acted on that knowledge too perfectly, the Germans would suspect Enigma was compromised. All of Bletchley's work, the captured machine, the code books, it could all be undone in a week if Berlin ordered a total cipher change. So the decision was made: don't act in a way that reveals the source. Prepare defences quietly, without moving forces in ways that couldn't be explained by normal reconnaissance. The result was a half measure. The defenders of Crete fought bravely but were overwhelmed. Thousands of Allied troops were killed or captured. It's one of the most haunting examples of the terrible arithmetic of secret war. You save 1,000 here by letting 100 die there, not because you want to, but because revealing the truth would cost millions later. And the people who made those calls, Churchill included, carried the knowledge with them for the rest of their lives. The decision not to fully warn the defenders of Crete was a quiet, cold act, made in some of the most smoke-filled rooms in Whitehall. Around the table sat generals, admirals, ministers, and one or two men who knew the true scale of the risk. If they used the ultra-intelligence from the freshly captured U-boat too aggressively, Berlin would know. And if Berlin knew, the Germans would change everything. Rotors, code books, the lot. The great door Turing and his team had pried open would slam shut, and the war would lurch back into darkness. So the planners swallowed their instincts. They allowed just enough warning to justify preparations by other means, sending reconnaissance planes over Crete, intercepting radio chatter, moving a few troops under cover of routine redeployment. But the heart of it, the exact time and scale of the invasion, was left hidden behind a wall of silence. And so, on the morning of 20th of May, 1941, the sky above Crete bloomed with black dots, thousands of German paratroopers dropping like steel seeds. The defenders fought savagely, but the Germans took the airfields, and with them the island. The cost was immense. Over 4,000 Allied dead, thousands more captured. It was a calculated sacrifice, and the calculation worked. The Germans never realised Enigma had been compromised. The flow of ultra-intelligence continued, and the war, on paper in numbers, began to tilt. The next years were a battle not of armies, but of hours. Every morning, new intercepted messages arrived at Bletchley Park. U-boat coordinates, Luftwaffe bombing plans, troop movements in occupied Europe. Every night, those messages expired when Enigma's settings changed. Turing's bombs whirred and clicked like mechanical hearts, racing to beat midnight. Cribs, those guessed fragments like Wettervorhersage or Heil Hitler, were fed in. Paper tapes rattled out results. Wrens ran the machines in shifts so tight they barely saw daylight. The intelligence they produced changed the war's shape. In the North Atlantic, convoys began to slip around U-boat wolf packs. The sinkings dropped. Supplies from America reached Britain in greater numbers, feeding not just the island's people, but its armies. In North Africa, Rommel's fuel convoys were ambushed because Ultra had revealed their schedules. By 1943, his Africa course was starving on the battlefield. And in the build-up to D-Day, Bletchley's intercepts fed directly into one of the greatest deceptions in history, convincing Hitler that the invasion would land in Pas-de-Calais, not Normandy. German troops waited in the wrong place, while Allied forces poured onto French beaches. The Nazis were bleeding from 1,000 invisible cuts, many of them struck by men and women they had never heard of, working in huts they would never see. By 1945, the Third Reich was collapsing. Soviet tanks closed in from the east, the Western Allies from the west. Berlin was in ruins, but in the quiet countryside of Buckinghamshire, the work did not stop. Bletchley Park was still reading Enigma, still handing down the last scraps of intelligence, flights out of besieged cities, frantic orders to non-existent units, desperate calls for fuel that would never come. And Alan Turing? He was still at his desk. No uniform, No medals, just the same teacup, the same battered shoes, the same head full of numbers. He had not fired a shot, and yet his fingerprints were all over the defeat of the Nazis. Churchill would later say that the codebreakers had shortened the war by at least 2 years, saving millions of lives. But for Turing, there was no parade, no public thanks. The work was too secret. He walked away from Bletchley carrying nothing but his notebooks, and an idea forming quietly in his mind. The idea that had been quietly crystallising in Turing's mind through all those nights at Bletchley was something far larger than breaking codes. He'd spent years designing machines, not just the bombs, but theoretical devices in his mind that could follow a sequence of instructions to solve problems. The more he worked, the more he realised. If a machine could be given a set of rules and process information at incredible speed, there was no reason it couldn't be taught to adapt its rules. In other words, thinking. It wasn't a single lightning bolt moment, it was a slow accumulation. Watching a bomb tear through millions of possible enigma settings in minutes, seeing how a clever crib could guide the machine to the right answer, understanding that the same logic could be applied to almost any problem if the machine was versatile enough. The war had shown him two things: that humans and machines could work in partnership to solve problems neither could do alone. That the key to this partnership was not the physical machine, but the program, the set of instructions that could change at will. This was the seed of what he would later formalize as the concept of the universal computing machine, a single device that, if given the right program, could do anything that any other machine could do. At Bletchley, that meant breaking ciphers. In peace, it could mean anything: mathematics, science, maybe even something resembling human thought. By the time the war ended, Turing wasn't just thinking about how to use machines. He was imagining how to make machines that could think. The war ended and the world moved on, but Alan Turing's mind never stopped. In Manchester, he threw himself into the first generation of electronic computers, vast humming giants that filled entire rooms and shook when they started up. He was no longer just breaking codes, he was trying to make machines that could reason, adapt, and even, in some abstract way, learn. In 1952, a small twist of fate, a break-in at his home, brought the police to his door. In their questioning, Turing told the truth about his relationship with another man. In Britain, it was still a crime. War hero or not, he was charged with gross indecency. They gave him a choice: prison or probation, on the condition that he undergo treatment. Treatment meant chemical castration, synthetic estrogen injections that weakened his body, clouded his mind, and stripped away the strength he had once carried through the hardest years of his life. 2 years later, on a June morning in 1954, he was found dead at home. A half-eaten apple lay on the bedside table. The inquest called it suicide. He was 41. For decades, his story lay buried, his wartime brilliance locked behind official secrecy, his final years marked only by injustice. But time has a way of bringing truths to light. The public learned who he was, what he had done, and how he had been treated. In 2013, nearly 60 years after his death, Queen Elizabeth II granted Alan Turing a royal pardon, erasing the crime for which he had been condemned. It was an act too late to save him, but not too late to honour him. And now, his name stands not just for the victory he helped win in the shadows of war, but for the triumph of truth over silence. In the hum of every computer, in the logic of every algorithm, and in the simple act of telling his story at last, Alan Turing lives on.